late.
Okay. All right. So with that, we'll call this Board of Directors special board meeting, board retreat to order for Power Resources. If we can please have a roll call vote, please.
Great, thank you very much. Alameda County.
You're on
Present.
mute.
Thank you. Berkeley. Dublin.
Here.
Emeryville.
Present.
Fremont. Hayward. Hayward.
Hayward just stepped away, but she's here at the Hayward office.
Thank you. Lathrop. Livermore. Newark. Oakland.
Here.
Piedmont. San Leandro. Stockton. Stockton. Tracy.
Present.
Union City.
Here.
Community Advisory Committee. Albany.
Here at the Hayward location.
Yes, thank you. And Pleasanton.
Here at the Pleasanton location.
Thank you.
I think that's...
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm. Appreciate that. If we could all please rise, if you're able, for the Pledge of Allegiance. And ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I think we're all a little out of Zoom practice, but we did okay. Thank you. All right, with that, we are on item number 3, which is public comment. This portion of the meeting is for persons wishing to address Ava Community Energy for any items that are currently not listed on this agenda. Public comments on matters listed on this agenda shall be heard at that agenda item. With that, we will limit public comment to 3 minutes. Are there any members of the public that would like to participate or speak at this time? Adrian, since you're in the room, are there any public speakers in the room first?
There are no hands raised for public comment in the room.
Okay. And are there any members online who would like to, members of the public online who would like to speak on items related to, not on this agenda, public comment, item 3?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, we'll close public comment. We'll bring it back to the board. And with that, we're going to move to item number 4, Power Resources Update, an informational item presented by staff. And welcome.
Great. Let me give just a really quick introduction, and then I'll hand it over to the Power Resource team members to really run through the bulk of the meeting in this presentation. Adrian, if you can pull up the presentation, that would be great. Just as a really quick setup, typically when significant portions of the board turn over, we do a series of functional board retreats where we cover, just sort of informational items to get board members up to speed. We have done that on sort of Power Resources, energy markets previously. There has been no significant board turnover at this time, but there's always more information that we want to share more generally about energy markets, some of the practices, and just given the dynamic nature of market prices that we speak to quite frequently in various board meetings. So this is a scheduled 2-hour meeting to really go through some energy markets information, some compliance matters, et cetera. And so members of the Power Resources team will be presenting on different topics of this nature. My additional commentary is just in the previous Power Resources retreats, I would say we've probably covered sort of the 101 and 201 level materials, if we want to use some academic parlance. This one's probably a bit of 101, 201, and going a little bit more into 301, so some more advanced topics. There are some dense slides. We'll ask the team, of course, to best illustrate and speak to and define all the acronyms and things like that. It can be easily, one can easily get lost in some of the density of some of these scatter plots and such. So stick with the staff members here. We'll really highlight the main talking points and the takeaways, and always happy to follow up either here with live questioning or at a different time to clarify any information that may be in the presentation. So with that, I'll hand it over.
Great. I'll get us started. My name is Karen Lee, and I'm a Power Resources Manager. Welcome to our board retreat. Next slide. So we will first do a really quick introduction of the team and what we do. Next, we'll spend 15 to 20 minutes on resource adequacy. I will present that section. I will then hand it over to my colleague, Izzy Carson, to discuss renewable and carbon-free energy and emissions. That will be another 15 to 20 minutes. And finally, Chris Eshelman will present for roughly an hour on CAISO markets and energy pricing. Great. So this is just a smorgasbord of what we do on the Power Resources team. We hope that at the end of the 2 hours, we don't have time to go over everything here, but at least you can have an idea of some of the aspects that comprise energy hedging, resource adequacy, and the RECs and carbon-free portions. Next slide. So the AVA Power Resources team focuses on these 3 main products for short-term procurement. So that's resource adequacy, or RA. This is a compliance product, and we are required by the CPUC or California Public Utilities Commission to buy or procure resource adequacy to meet those state requirements. The second is renewable and carbon-free energy. There are state compliance requirements as well associated with RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standard. In addition, AVA has our own targets and goals with respect to how renewable we want our portfolio to be and how carbon-free we want our portfolio to be. The third kind of short-term procurement item is energy hedging. So this is not a compliance item, but we really do this to make sure that we are not exposed to the ups and downs of the CAISO energy market. And Chris will go into much more detail later. So subsequently, I want to discuss the long-term offtake contracts. These are generally 10 or more years, and we generally contract for new build clean resources. Some of these contracts, they're also called power purchase agreements, comprise all 3 of resource adequacy, renewable, and energy, but sometimes it's just 1 or maybe 2 of them. We are required to procure these long-term offtake agreements to meet the RPS Renewable Portfolio Standard requirements and also state procurement mandates. Finally, the box out to the right, we have a risk manager, Ray Dye, who oversees this procurement and ensures that we are in compliance with AVA's energy risk regulations. All right, next slide. All right, so I'll just jump into resource adequacy here. Next slide. So RA is a capacity product. As mentioned earlier, we are a California load serving entity, and because of that, we have requirements from the CPUC or the Public Utilities Commission to procure RA. So what is RA exactly? So capacity ensures that there is sufficient resources and energy for the grid to maintain a balanced supply and demand. In today's RA framework, we have a system RA obligation and a flex RA obligation. The compliance period is monthly, so we make showings to the state for each month of the year. I will just mention that previously we had a local RA obligation, but starting in 2023, there were some regulatory changes, and the central procurement entity is now responsible for local RA. Great, next slide. So there have been a lot of changes in the RA world recently, mainly that our requirements will change to a slice of day structure. So currently we kind of have that one system RA number that we're trying to hit in a month. Now we will have 24 hourly obligations in each month. And in order to be compliant, we have to meet the RA obligation in each of those 24 hourly slices. The reason for the shift is that previously we were procuring to the hour of peak load. With the changing nature of the grid and more renewables and batteries online, there was concern that if we procured to that single hour, we might be left short in other hours. So this is kind of the new structure or paradigm that we have. Starting next year, we will be obligated to procure RA and meet the slice of day requirements. Our obligation is based on, our obligation is based on AVA's contribution to CAISO's worst day of each month. So still, you know, kind of depends on what we're contributing to the peak. Next slide. So this next slide has some visuals that can hopefully help people digest this a little better. So in the visuals, the x-axis is the 24 hours of a hypothetical month. And again, these are all hypothetical positions. And so the x-axis is the 24 hours. The y-axis is RA in megawatts. So a typical LSE's position could be some baseload resources. That's the blue resources that can contribute to each of the 24-hourly slices. Next, we see quite a bit of solar. Solar is contributing in the hours where solar is operating, and that profile is based on historical performance data of solar resources across the state. So that's the pink. There's a little bit of wind, that's the purple. And finally, storage does something interesting here. Storage is the green, and we're actually using the storage to shift excess RA in hours ending around 7 to 15 to the latter part of the day, hours ending 18 to 24. And that blue curve is the RA obligation. So you can see in certain hours we've exceeded that RA obligation, and that's the excess that's being moved over to the latter part of the day. And then the second visual is showing something similar, but in that case, or in this specific month, the LSE is not compliant. So, you know, they would need to consider additional procurement of probably some 24-hour resources or a mix of solar plus storage.
Can I just highlight one quick thing here is, as Karen already stated, this change is taking place in 2025. So up through this year, 2024, we are not in a 24-hour sort of slice of day methodology. And what that means is we're really looking at the peak demand throughout the day or really throughout the year in order to set our RA obligations. I highlight this because when you look at this graph, the reason that we're changing to an RA slice of day sort of methodology is because, one, there is significant demand in the evening hours that the CAISO grid needs to manage towards. And two, there is an increasing risk of also being able to manage baseload hours overnight, giving increasing solar and other resources, namely baseload resources or sort of long duration energy storage resources that are becoming more scarce. And so this is driven by a concern and a risk around needing adequate resources throughout the day, which may be stating the obvious, but when you look at a graph like that, really helps to illustrate what we're talking about and the different types of resources, giving the increasing concentration on solar that is happening, that is needed in order to serve load at every point during the day, giving the variable load and demand that customers drive.
Thanks. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. So related to resource adequacy are these reliability procurement mandates from the state. So far, there have been 3 different procurement orders from the CPUC issued to load-serving entities to procure capacity from new clean resources. So the first one was called near-term reliability. That one we've already completed that and have been compliant, but that was the 21 to 23 term. Next is midterm reliability. We are within this compliance term right now. And then there was also a supplemental midterm reliability procurement order for years 2026 and 2027. Next slide. So we wanted to highlight some of the challenges in the RA world. So first is regulatory, as you saw from the previous slides, the complexity of RA compliance has increased quite a bit from a single number a month to 24 numbers in a single month. With that, there's been a lot of time and resources and work involved both at the state level and within each LSE to understand those rules and understand how their position looks in this new slice of day paradigm. Secondly, the CAISO system is short RA. We are dependent both on import resources and new resources being built. So the first visual in the top right-hand corner is a stack analysis performed by CalCCA, and it shows for hour ending 19 of September, which is considered to be the, hour ending 19 is the peak hour, and September is the month with the highest load. They looked at for every year from 2023 to 2026, what is the expected CAISO load, and what are all the resources we're getting within CAISO. So they also layered in imports. So what they found is we can satisfy our needs, but there's a very narrow margin. And then they also found that if there is extreme weather, we see extreme weather conditions, that last row 16, we actually would expect to be short. So I think this just describes that, we are in a time where we are short capacity. There's scarcity in the market. We are dependent on the import resources and the new resources coming online. Regarding the new resources coming online, there are challenges with that. First is it's not just load serving entities in the state buying renewable and carbon-free energy. There's also a lot of demand from corporates. And frankly, the new projects just aren't being built fast enough. The projects that are being built, we have seen delays due to interconnection, permitting, and supply chain. So these are just some of the things we see in the market with project construction that are impacting new build projects. Finally, I'll point you to the graphic in the lower right-hand corner. This is RA pricing for 2024 calendar year. And so we can see that in 2021, it was around $6. Late 2023, it was around $25. So RA pricing has quadrupled in 2 years. A lot of the factors that I just mentioned are reasons, right? Those regulatory changes creating uncertainty, the system being short, RA being scarce, difficulties bringing new resources online. I think given the context of the CalCCA analysis, we do anticipate the scarcity lessening a little bit after 2024, but we will still be in scarce conditions for several years.
One other quick element I would just add to this is, in addition to all those elements that Karen has highlighted here, with RA slice of day, there is a potential lack of liquidity between different load serving entities to be able to either trade on different hourly needs. And that is a concern that we have specifically because that lack of liquidity is one of the things that can also drive up pricing. And so I think we want to try to, from a regulatory perspective, aim to have some conversations to try to facilitate some additional liquidity, either from a requirements perspective or from a supply perspective, to hopefully ease that liquidity issue, and hopefully that has benefits to pricing.
Great. I think that concludes the RA section. So I will pass it off to my colleague, Izzy Carson.
All right. Thanks, Karen.
Could we pause a moment? Should we ask if there's any questions of the members before we go to the next section? Howard or team?
Yeah, I think that would be good. The topics are pretty, can be pretty dense. And so asking them a little bit more actively would probably be helpful.
Okay. So are there any members currently that have questions related to the resource adequacy bit? Member Roche.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just hearing, all the worry about scarcity of procurement, and we have this 2030 goal to get to be renewable by 2030. I'm just wondering, that's only 4 years now. What are we at now? 6 years. We're at 2024. What does that outlook look for the next 6 years? I mean, given that it takes time to bring them online, build them potentially. Just wondering how realistic we are about 2030.
We are on track to achieving our 2030 goal, and it is possible that we will engage with the board in the future if prices stay as at a sustained high level. Some of the 100% emissions-free portfolio will be contracted through long-term offtake agreements, power purchase agreements from new build, solar, wind, et cetera. And some of them will be contracted from existing projects, and some of them will be sort of like bundled purchases where we're buying clean carbon-free energy or different volumes of products from portfolios of resources. But we're looking at making these procurement choices in a way that is both durable and cost-effective for our customers. But to your point, given the tightness of supply that we have right now, for example, as communities opt up to being 100%, on the renewable 100 product, there are trade-offs that have to be considered with regards to the pricing of our products and our ability to get, the energy and the associated RECs in the marketplace.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I would just also add, sorry, one other element I'll add is just to highlight that you can decouple the RA compliance item from your renewable energy purchases or energy needs. That you don't have to, but that is, I think that's one thing that I just want to highlight as to what Maurice was speaking to, is you can meet that obligation in various ways from a contracting perspective. And so when we go and procure new renewable energy, we will get some resource adequacy for specific hours of the day. But if you bought that on a standalone basis, as you saw in those illustrative curves, we're pretty well procured in the middle of the day because of the extent of solar that is on the grid. So we need storage to actually shift that into the evening hours to really cover those later evening specific hourly slices. And then I would just say further that when you think about some of the base load needs, obviously a lot of that is not addressed via solar. So that's where there's specifically a benefit in being able to decouple some of your procurements.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm not sure I understood all of it, but I really appreciate the thorough answer. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions by any additional members at this time related to resource adequacy? Okay, I just wanted to ask Howard, maybe you can help me understand, when we brought on additional resources, we looked at the plants down in, I believe, the Fresno, Kern County area. They were principally for resource adequacy, but they would alter our content label potentially because they were, I believe, natural gas plants versus some of the others. So is there a concern that even our portfolio would change if we had to meet our resource adequacy targets?
So I think that speaks a little bit to the point I made about you can decouple these procurements. So, for example, you can go buy resource adequacy from a natural gas plant, from a large hydro plant, from different types of baseload resources, and it does not hit your power content label because you're not explicitly buying the power or the attributes from that, but rather just the capacity from that. And so that's where RAA currently has no implication to power content label.
Okay. Can I add one little additional detail there? So when we talk about capacity is a weird thing. Capacity is the ability to generate energy. It does not mean that energy is actually generated. So in order for a resource, whether it's a gas plant or a solar plant, to be a resource adequacy resource, that yes, they sign a contract saying, we are going to sell you our resource adequacy. And then they have a performance obligation, which means that they must make themselves, they have to show themselves on an advanced basis 45 days before. So in mid-June, we will file our August supply plan and show our resource adequacy resources. And then in August, there are obligations that they actually bid and make themselves available to the CAISO along, with a very detailed set of rules for how available they have to be. So when we're buying resource adequacy, we are paying for future grid reliability. That does not actually mean that we are getting any energy from the resource.
Okay, thank you. Any other members? Okay, Pleasanton's having a technical problem. We're going to switch out our camera here on my side, but let's go and proceed to the next item. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll just jump in here. Renewable and carbon-free energy and emissions associated with that. So there's two kind of buckets that fall under this. On the renewable side, we have the renewable energy credits, or RECs. These are what we use to meet compliance. They represent the clean energy attributes of renewable electricity. A REC is really a certificate that's created when renewable electricity is generated. And one REC is equivalent to 1 megawatt hour of renewable electricity that's generated. These are classified into 3 distinct categories called portfolio content category, or PCCs, and they're 1s, 2s, and 3s. And there are limitations to the amount that each group can count towards our RPS compliance. So for PCC 1s, these are considered a bundled product. They are from renewable resources where the energy and the REC are delivered together and they're from the same source. think of our Altamont Pass Wind facility here in Alameda County. It's an example of a PCC1. PCC2s also come from renewable resources, but they're generated out of state, which where the energy is used locally, and the REC is then bundled with substitute energy that's not from the same source of the REC, but could also be renewable, and then again delivered at the same time as the REC. So think about a wind resource in Oregon, for example, where that energy is used locally and then bundled with substitute energy and then delivered at the same time. A PCC3 is considered an unbundled product. It's because the REC doesn't have any of the underlying energy that's attached there. And then on the other side, the carbon-free energy, we really have no regulatory compliance associated with the carbon-free energy. This is primarily used to reduce emissions. It offsets our unspecified energy, and it's used to meet customer commitments. It is not RPS eligible. These are large hydro facilities over 30 megawatts, and again, so there's no compliance requirements, and they're not eligible for RPS. Next. We'll jump right into emissions here. The table here in the middle reflects the targets that the board adopted in 2020. It's our clean energy goal for Avers portfolio to have zero net emissions by 2030. You'll see the renewable and carbon-free columns increasing year over year, and then you'll see the unspecified and emissions going down year over year towards those targets. On the top there, you'll see the 2022 actuals and 2023 and 2024 targets. All of those are higher than what was originally adopted in this table here. And then down at the bottom, you'll see the 2022 emissions factor. I just want to note here that 2022 is the most recently available final power content numbers that we have. 2023, despite being nearly halfway through 2024, it's not finalized yet, and it's probably at the earliest late into this year before we have that. There's a significant reporting lag on power content, and there's also some additional challenges this year with the recreation that are leading to some delays. So just want to highlight that that's why there's the 2022 numbers here. So if you're looking at the number on the bottom here, that emission factor, that 496, and then the two numbers below it, that 270, we'll call it 272, and the 224, add up to that total 496. Prior to 2020, what we reported from was something called the Climate Registry, which is that TCR. And it's a nonprofit national emissions accounting methodology. It was widely used by LSEs and IOUs, cities, CCAs. And in 2020, there was an assembly bill, AB 1110, that required replacing the use of that TCR Climate Registry which is a sort of a global methodology, to a California-specific methodology. So the last slide, we talked about PCC2 RECs, and AVA purchases a portion of our renewables as these PCC2 RECs. Again, these are a renewable product. They are counted as renewable under the RPS program. They're by and large solar, wind, and small hydro facilities generated outside of California. There's clean energy being generated, and there's emissions that are being reduced. It's just that those emissions are being reduced in another state. And because of that, under that California-specific methodology that the Assembly Bill requires we use, that accounting adds an emission factor for those PCC2 RECs equivalent to unspecified system power. Right now, that's weighted by gas. But prior to 2020, we only had to report on the line there that says the TCR emissions factor, and that's what, really the unspecified power in our portfolio. So you can see how dramatically the numbers change just by the accounting methodology shifts. And those are really the two main drivers of our emissions, our unspecified power and then the emissions that are associated with our PCC2 RECs. Then we'll jump into the power content label. It's an annual requirement to disclose the mix of sources used to provide electricity. Again, this is the 2022 power content label. You'll see the three products that we have there: Renewable 100, Brilliant 100 at the time, and then Bright Choice. You can see the electricity sources shown as a percentage there of annual sales. And then you'll see that emissions factor on the left there that's specific to Bright Choice, that 496. So what the power content label really is showing us is what we paid for through direct or indirect transactions. So examples of direct transaction are when we get electricity from a solar resource under like a long-term PPA, or through a short-term transaction from a specific resource, like a specific hydro generator in Washington State, for example. And an example of an indirect indirect transaction is when we buy electricity through the CAISO market. So this shows up on our power content label as unspecified sources of power, and you'll see that line there specific to Bright Choice, and it shows up as 28.4. Since we don't know exactly which generator or generators that unspecified power has come from, it's assigned an emissions factor that's meant to be reflective of the average emissions level on the electric system. So another way to think about unspecified power is it's being used as balancing. So it's really the difference between what we've procured on behalf of our Bright Choice customers and what's actually needed to serve their load. Again, this is an annual requirement. If we compare this power content label to a previous year or to the targets on that table on the previous slide, you'll see those emissions going down and renewable content going up. Year over year, that's in line with our adopted schedule and the approved path to zero emissions electricity 2030. Next slide. So we do know some changes are coming with respect to emissions. We don't know what the rules are going to be for those changes, but we do know that Senate Bill 1158 was passed in 2022, and that beginning January 1st of 2028, it requires hourly reporting from every retail supplier, requires hourly reporting of every retail supplier. With that Senate bill, the CEC is required to adopt regulations by July of this year, coming up here pretty quick. We expect that there will be a delay to those rules coming out. The last update that we received was in February of this year. There was a revised pre-rulemaking that was released, but there's been no progress since that time. So we do expect there to be a delay on those rules. But when they come out, that gives us between their release and this 2028 date to really understand them and implement them in a way for us to meet those hourly requirements. And there are a number of potential impacts that could play out with the hourly emissions reporting. Really, the overarching challenge is the added and significant complexity that the hourly reporting brings. It'll really be dependent on our ability to track and report, to forecast, to be able to bid and dispatch. We have a number of long-term contracts in place that didn't contemplate hourly emissions reporting. And so how those deliveries are or will be affected under those contracts, the communication and collaboration that needs to happen to be able to put those in place. There may be cost increases associated with necessary systems or forecasting software, additional job functions related to this reporting. It may also require changes in procurement plans to meet the existing GHG emissions targets. So there are a number of impacts really that remain to be seen to these new rules as they're rolled out. We'll be working better to understand the impacts and to implement those once they're released. But really right now, we just wanted to highlight that we know some changes are coming, and we'll be working to better understand those as they are released. So with that, I'll pass on to Chris for CAISO market overview. I guess we'll stop for questions.
Yeah, let's stop for questions. And I just want to sort of recall Member Roach's question about our ability to meet our zero emissions target in 2030. The zero emissions goal was established in a world of annual emissions accounting. And annual emissions accounting and what we imagine the hourly emissions accounting rules and regime to be like are very different. And so once the CEC actually establishes what the rules for hourly emissions accounting will be, we expect that there will be dialogue with the board to determine if we want to continue on our path to meet our annual emissions goal of zero emissions, and or if that goal should be modified given the additional requirement of reporting emissions on an hourly basis. But it's just worth noting that hourly emissions reporting and annual reporting are not the same thing at all.
I would also just add on maybe two quick points. One is that the hourly emissions reporting, I think, is, as noted, pretty uncertain as to timing for something like that to be approved and then implemented. And I think our soft expectations, it's going to take some time. It's a pretty complex system and also has some cost and political ramifications to also get approved. So I foresee that could take some time. So that's one comment. The other comment is just a little bit related to my comment on sort of liquidity around RA slice of day. That theme plays into this as well, in that if you had every load serving entity required to have their emissions tracked on a 24/7 basis, that may be good for informational purposes, but may have the impact of hindering liquidity, right? You're creating these sort of silos of load serving entities needing to procure to hourly needs, both for RA purposes, and then also needing to do that from an emissions standpoint. That has a potential to increase costs because you're not really taking the benefit of multiple regions with various needs. And that's sort of the benefit of having a larger balancing authority amongst CAISO, and perhaps even a benefit amongst a broader West region. So the ability to balance across a larger territory and having more diversified resources across more load serving entities has a benefit from a cost perspective and maybe even from a reliability perspective. While a 24/7 emissions accounting methodology may have benefits from, say, a transparency perspective or to drive cleaner energy across various load serving entities. So these are somewhat opposing tensions that we see on these different methodologies. With that, happy to take if there are any questions from the board, of course, before moving on to the next topic.
Yeah, Member Cox.
Thank you. I had a quick question, and I was wondering, since there is a timeline of being in compliance and possibly by 2028, is there any type of research that is happening right now to help us identify ways to be more efficient in terms of, you were mentioning possibly a software that measures the hourly reporting versus the emissions? Is that something you're going out on a solicitation right now to kind of see what's out there in the market and what the potential cost would be, providing it has to still go to the board for approval?
We are not going out to market to onboard any software solutions at this time. We think it's most important that we want to know what the rules are before we decide what products might help us meet the rules. And as Izzy highlighted, the rules were supposed to be established by this July, and they just started the process of establishing the rules in February and then have done nothing. We're not going to have rules this summer. It's probably going to be a year before we have any rules. So the 2028 compliance date might end up slipping. But we are actually doing outreach and having conversations with some technology vendors to understand what products exist today that parties, commercial and industrial companies, for example, that have their own 24/7 emissions reporting requirements, some tools that they might be using. And in our long-term resource planning and different internal analyses, we are starting to look more at how well do our contracted resources and the resources that we might contract with help us meet this 24/7 emissions reporting requirement. So let's see, we would normally have to file an integrated resource plan, a long-term resource planning document with the CPUC in 2024, but they've delayed that work stream by a year as well. So it will be done in November of 2025. But the board can expect that we will be sharing information as we go through that study process. And some of the information that we will share will be about the ability of our contracted resources to meet the 24/7's emissions reporting requirements, and some possible costs of fully meeting 24/7's emissions reporting requirements, if we are able to contract for other types of resources.
Thank you. I know it's a monumental challenge coming in until things are a little bit more solid, but it does take time even after you roll it out to verify the information. It's like combining it from so many sources and the accuracy and transparency. But thank you for your update there. Thanks.
Any other member comments? Okay. Continue on, please.
Adrian, could you pull up the slides again? And we'll be going over Chris.
Yeah. So my name is Chris Eshelman. I'm a director here in the Power Resources Department. And I know everything there is to know about the energy market. So let's do some knowledge sharing. Here we go. All right. So the wholesale energy market is not unique to California or the West. There are about 9 different what we call balancing authorities, or RTOs. RTO stands for Regional Transmission Owner. And they're kind of spread out across the US here. The first one being PJM, which was back in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland, which serves more than those 3 states, but the name sticks. And basically the idea behind what a balancing authority is that they are in charge of balancing the supply and the demand within their given region. So each of these regions kind of across the US here are slightly different in terms of both the resource mix that's within them, the weather that drives a lot of the demand and supply, as well as just other geopolitical fun. But what is pretty much common across all of them is that they all transact wholesale energy market products. So the first one is energy. We've talked about that kind of briefly in these other 2 sections here as kind of the underlying kind of commodity behind the capacity and the RECs. But energy itself is what turns on our lights. The next thing is transmission. So transmission is kind of a big and fun animal, but it's necessary to get things from A to B. Capacity, as Karen mentioned, kind of comes in 2 flavors. There's the resource adequacy, which she mentioned, and then there's the other thing, which is known as ancillary services. So these are kind of products that are procured by a balancing authority to ensure that there is resource sufficiency in case demand changes within a day. Then there's natural gas. Natural gas is I wouldn't say 100% correlated, but it's fairly correlated to energy prices. And natural gas plants tend to be the marginal unit. So when prices rise up in kind of the evening hours of a day, it's usually driven by natural gas. Then there's something called congestion revenue rights that just gives people the right to get the congestion payment from one point to another. And then there's the renewable energy products RECs, as you mentioned. Next. So here's California. It doesn't include all of California, oddly enough, but there are a few other kind of sub-balancing authorities within the state. The kind of other highly known one is Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, which is down in the south. And there's a few other different kind of companies and irrigation districts and, other kind of small municipalities around the state that do kind of their own balancing there. But the part that the CAISO, the California Independent System Operator, manages, there's about 45,000 megawatt hours or 45 gigawatt hours, depending on how you want to look at the number there. 26,000, that's just kind of a rough number of how much transmission. So when we talk in transmission level, that's the higher voltages. That doesn't include kind of the distribution level. CAISO is only in charge of the high voltage lines. They don't deal with the transmission or the distribution portion, and that is controlled by the either these sub-balancing authorities that are here or the investor-owned utilities throughout the state. There's somewhere around 10,000 pricing nodes. So that's a lot. It's a lot of different nodes to keep track of. Each one has a unique price that is associated with it to drive the supply and demand there. And then kind of as I mentioned with the balancing authority, wholesale power market, reliability, and then grid planning. Next, please. So I did not make this. I wish I would, but I'm not that good of a graphic artist. But if you can see in very kind of light opacity behind here, there's a picture of a duck. And this is where the duck curve concept comes from, is because it looks like a duck, hence the quack quack. But what this is showing is that in 2019, the electricity demand in the middle of the day was fairly high. 24,000 in the middle of the day is considered, I would consider it to be rather high. Now, as we start to move forward in time, in 2020, 2021, and even 2022, that middle of the day load then starts to get really what I will call trophy, which isn't a word, but it's a big trough there. And what that ultimately is, coming about because there's a lot of solar. There's a lot of solar plants within the state. There's now a lot of batteries that are coming online in the grid, and all of that is lowering the net demand that's in the middle of the day there. So that these numbers here will start to get lower and lower as more and more resources that generate from the sun come about. And then, as we can see, there's a really steep ramp up to the evening peak. So around 6 p.m., 7 p.m., depending on what time of the year, is peak demand for the state of California as a whole. And that ramp, the period between 3 and 6 p.m. is starting to get steeper and steeper. And that's where prices can really start to get interesting, because you need resources that can come online super quick. And ultimately, that usually falls back to either hydro plants or natural gas plants, like peakers, to really just kind of get you up that ramp. Next, please. So this is US-wide solar and wind PPA pricing. I got this from Level 10, who is, they kind of do a lot of infrastructure and software and a number of transactional kind of databasing for, a bunch of different projects around the country. And so this is not numbers for California, but just kind of as the US-wide. But, the key takeaway from this is that if we notice kind of in that 2020 timeframe, i.e. COVID, right after that, prices just started to go up, and they just keep kind of going up at a very steady pace there. And so that's ultimately driving long-term procurements that we enter into to be higher priced. And so we're entering into, let's call it a 15-year power purchase agreement at these higher prices. We have to have that higher price for the next 15 years, regardless of what happens in the actual spot market. So this is, part of kind of the dynamic that we're in right now, is the post-COVID boom of pricing with respect to wind and solar throughout the country. All right, so this data is pulled from CAISO itself here. And now what this is showing is the total output of both solar and wind by year. So we got 2020 through 2023. If we look on the left side, that is the total yearly megawatt hours there. I think that's gigawatt hours, actually. But these, the top pieces, the little black bar and then the really dark blue bar at the top, are showing how much of the total is curtailed within that year. So wind doesn't get curtailed that often. Wind kind of in the Western US, specifically in like the New Mexico region, or even kind of in the south of California, the shape of wind throughout kind of a year is almost an analog to solar. So it kind of has an evening peak and it has a morning peak with kind of less in the middle of the day. And so it doesn't get curtailed that often. And curtailments occur when you are bidding an asset into the market and the price for that actually settles within the market is below whatever your bid price is. So let's just say we set our bid price at 0. If prices within the market go to -10, that's below what we are willing to sell that commodity at. And then we get curtailed or turned off. And so, you know, this trend is showing that there is a steady increase in the capacity of solar that's showing up on the system, which, you know, you see all these solar plants being built up around. It's no surprise there. But also we start to see that curtailment block at the top start getting bigger. And while it's kind of proportional to the change in the in sort of the ramp of the capacity itself, you know, these numbers might actually start to shrink if we start to get more batteries online, because batteries typically currently charge when prices are lowest, and that's usually coincides with when solar is the highest. So there'll be, I could see a point where there's kind of we don't start to get as many curtailments because there's so many batteries that are just taking up that really cheap power. But for now, curtailments are kind of coming about as a regular piece in there. And what a curtailment can really, it doesn't just take away the energy that is produced onto the grid. It also takes away RECs that could be produced. So to produce a REC, you have to have energy that gets produced, you know, from a solar plant or from a wind plant. And so if it gets curtailed, you're not producing those RECs, and there's no way to get them back. You can't go back in time and generate. So once you curtail, those RECs are gone. So this black chunk at the top here is RECs that could have been generated, but were not, because whatever, you know, plants were bidding in were curtailed because of the prices. That's a key thing to note there. And then the next, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go for it.
Chris, are you finishing out this slide, or are you jumping to the next slide?
No, I'm done with this one. Yeah.
Okay. Let me just comment really quick here. A couple high level, I guess, more macro points is the reason why this trend is really critical is because as you contract for more solar, if you do not have battery to shift that into other hours of the day, that belly of the duck is where you have that negative pricing. And that means your supply is exceeding your demand. So as a load serving entity, why that is important for us is if you are contracting more and more solar, that is negative exposure to us. If you are not contracting solar, that means you can go actually get paid to take power in the middle of the day. But for those entities like ours that have a heavy focus on renewable energy and a heavy concentration of solar within our portfolio, that means we're actually generating energy and we're having to pay when we're generating that energy, or we are choosing to curtail. And in most of our PPAs, we have what are commonly known as take or pay contracts, which means, yes, we have some rights to allow some curtailments without paying, but obviously without going into any confidential information on contracts, in general, if you over generate in those hours, you're electing to either pay for that or curtail that. And in many cases, you are still paying for some of that power if you choose to curtail. So this is a significant risk factor that we have to balance within our portfolio.
Yeah. And as we start to see kind of REC pricing kick up, it even comes into, you know, more importance, because if you don't generate, then, and you still have to meet your obligations, then you have to go out to the market and buy replacement RECs to meet the obligations that we have for our different products. So there's a lot of dynamics between the two. On the next slide here, this is kind of a more granular look just at the solar component, so you can kind of see where those curtailments are happening. And if we look at, at the top, it's 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and then kind of the start of 2024 here up through April. The most curtailments that we see are in April. And, you know, April's that kind of funny month. It's sort of in between winter and summer, where snowpack is the highest. Runoff is starting to happen for hydro. You have a lot of solar because spring is about, and you have low loads because you don't really need a lot of AC or or heating in either direction. So, most curtailments occur within the month of April, and then there's kind of the shoulder months of April where you see the kind of the next biggest amounts of curtailment within that. As you start to get towards the summer period, you start to see very little curtailments, which is what you want. Prices in the summer tend to be elevated in general. You don't start to see as many negative pricing events that could curtail resources. And, prices are just generally high because of the heat that typically accompanies a Q3 of any given year. And then generation for solar is typically the lowest in the winter because of clouds, rain, those typical weather events there. So we have to rely more heavily on other types of resources, such as natural gas, to kind of fill in the voids because of that just general depression of generation there. Alrighty, so this is the CAISO market structure here. There's two different markets. Technically, there's three, but we'll call them two. So there's the day-ahead market, and so the day-ahead market takes place every day, and it closes at 10 a.m. every single day, 365 days a year, or 66 for leap year. And what the CAISO is doing is it's gathering all the bids for supply and the bids, the offers for supply and the bids for demand. And it's running kind of a big model that they have to determine which units get committed, which units are going to start, which units are going to stop. It's going to determine the price at each of those pricing nodes. So all 10,000 of those pricing nodes that they have, there's a unique price that comes out of that. And it's settling the market for everything that is set up for the next day. And so by the nature is that the market is closed at 10 a.m. So like on this morning, the market closed at 10 a.m. for tomorrow. So everybody's forecasting what's going to happen tomorrow. No one actually knows what's going to happen tomorrow, unless you're a nuclear facility, you know what you're going to generate. But everything else is kind of just a little bit of a guess. And so there's the interesting concept where everything's just a forecast, and everything that you're doing and bidding off of is a forecast. And so there's a number of different other market processes that come into play here. The day-ahead market is also called the integrated forward market, IFM, if you see that around there. The market also clears what's known as residual unit commitment, or RUC. So that is the difference between what actually settles out of the market and what the forecast of demand is coming from the ISO. So the ISO is procuring enough resources to ensure that it has resource sufficiency to meet its own forecast of demand for tomorrow. So that's kind of the day-ahead market. Again, that runs every day. A single one time every day for the next 24 hours. The next day is 24 hours. Then there's the real-time market. And so the real-time market is actually broken up into two components. There's the 15-minute market and the 5-minute market. They basically do the same thing. The reason that there are different granularities of time here is that as you get closer and closer to any given point, your forecasts, for example, for weather or for wind or for solar, start to become more and more accurate because there's less uncertainty as to what's going to happen. You're kind of more in the moment there. The CAISO is still matching the supply and demand. That is their underlying function. They are procuring any incremental resources to whatever cleared in the day-ahead market. That could be either in upward direction or in a negative direction, depending on how the load comes in at. And they're also rerunning different market processes to ensure that there is sufficiency of resources within the market. So that means starting up plants that may need to be running, managing curtailments if there's too much there, managing imports and exports to different balancing authorities throughout the West. All this happens every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes. This is also the time when ancillary services actually start to get committed. So kind of in that 5-minute time frame is when the ISO will firm up the reserves of both what's known as regulation, which is basically a frequency control mechanism. So the ISO can pulse a unit up and down as much as they need to maintain frequency on the system. and then what's known as spinning reserve and non-spinning reserve. And those are reserves that are there, that the resources can come online and sync to the grid within 10 minutes to ensure that if any event were to happen or a big unit such as Diablo were to trip off, that there are units that can come online in a super quick fashion. Next, please. So this is the market flow of how things happen. I mentioned the day ahead, the 15-minute market, and then the real-time pre-dispatch, which is the 5-minute market. If we go a little bit higher, there's the year and month ahead. So similarly to how kind of Karen was talking about these obligations for resource adequacy, there are also futures markets for energy. And you can procure energy hedging, which is a kind of a financial product, many months in advance. So this gives us a way to use a different market that's outside of the CAISO to hedge our costs. And so we do a combination of kind of all of these different layers here to effectively manage and risk averse our position. Go next. I'll just go quickly over what a locational marginal price. So I mentioned that the CAISO has about 10,000 pricing nodes. Each of those has a locational marginal price, meaning the marginal price at that location. And it's the sum of 3 different components. So there's the generational marginal cost, which is the same generational marginal cost across the entire CAISO. So every single pricing node has the same marginal cost, generational margin cost. Now, what makes a pricing node different from one to another is the transmission congestion cost. So there's congestion on lines, kind of like traffic or demand pricing for like carpool lanes that they have. At least they have that in San Diego. So that's like a congestion cost depending on how much is on the system. And then there's the marginal cost of losses. So there's different points through the system that are measuring how many losses actually occur due to heat loss over lines. Next, please. So this is all this is all the pricing nodes within within the CAISO system. Some of them are actually off the chart here, or off the graph here. But so CAISO does everything within its own balancing authority, but the CAISO also has what's known as the Western Energy Imbalance Market, or the EIM. And so that in the 5-minute market, only in the 5-minute market, so out of those 3 markets, the day ahead, the 15 and the 5, only in the 5-minute market, they operate what's known as the Energy Imbalance Market, which rebalances basically anybody who participates in that program in the West. So these are all of the different nodes that are participating within that, that program there. But namely the ones that are in California, if we focus on those, the ones that have the white circles around them, this is just showing the difference in price between the North and the South. And to not go into too much detail, there's a big transmission line called North Path and South Path 15, runs up along I-5 if you ever gone past there. There's a big transmission line. And that is the key highway between the South and the North. And if that starts to get congested, you start to get pricing divergences like this chart is showing. Obviously, these ones aren't very big, but there are times when you see prices that are highly negative in the South and highly positive in the North. And now you know why. Next. So demand pricing, all of our customers settle at the PG&E DLAP, or default load aggregation point. So this is an arbitrary, it's not arbitrary, but it's a fictional point within the system. It doesn't exist physically. That is an aggregation of all of the load within PG&E's service territory. So the load is basically broken up into 3 different DLAPs and then a bunch of different like sub DLAPs beyond that. So there's 3 big ones, the PG&E, SCE, and SDG&E for the different investor-owned utilities. And it kind of delineates who kind of has each region of demand. So all of our customers settle at PG&E DLAP. All of SCE customers settle at SCE DLAP, SDG&E, et cetera. And then, you know, what's interesting is then if you look at like 3CE, who has customers in 2 different utilities, they have certain customers that settle at SCE DLAP and certain customers that settle at PG&E DLAP. So there's different pricing between those different lap points. So that's where you get some interesting dynamics between what customers are settling at in the south and in the north because of what I just mentioned of that constraint between the north and south path. Alrighty, so forward pricing here. So this will get into kind of the forwards that I had mentioned there before, which is that first box in that kind of step down waterfall tier of the different markets here. Next, please. Yeah, so forward markets are procured because they serve as a hedge against load. That is, one of the key things of what we try and accomplish is to, effectively hedge our expected load there. They serve as fixed price, fixed volume transactions. So once we enter into a transaction, we have a known price and a known volume, and that helps with the third point to lock in budget certainty. So we kind of have a better idea of what we need to budget for. It de-risks some of the supply to cover the load obligations because it's a fixed volume. So we don't have to be at the whim of, are there clouds today and the solar is going to generate or not? It's a fixed, some kind of block amount that we do. And it spreads out counterparty risk. We have a number of different counterparties that we transact with for these types of products, and they're spread out. So that gives us some counterparty de-risking there. And then we can capitalize on months and year ahead pricing. The further out, the more uncertainty people have in terms of what the price is actually going to be. And if you're able to transact those, somebody that's willing to actually sell it to you, you can capitalize on potentially lower prices because no one's sure what's going to happen with weather, natural gas pricing, other events there. Next, please. So this is just a chart to show forwards and what they're all about. So let me kind of set the stage here. So on the left, it's dollars per megawatt hour. On the y-axis there. On the x-axis is daily. It's only shown in kind of monthly there, but there's daily different points along this line here. And so what this is saying is this is for the calendar year of 2021. So for the entire year of 2021, what were the forwards that traded before then? And so up until December, well, not December 31st, but probably December 30th of 2020, so the 2 days prior to 2021, power could be traded for that entire block of the calendar year of 2021. And has been traded for potentially 2 or 3 years before that. So for example, right now we're in May 29th of 2024. We could be buying product for 2027, possibly, or 2028, because there might be a market out there for it. And what this chart is actually showing is that if we would have gone back to January of 2020, prices would have been, let's call it $38 or so. But as you start to get closer and closer to that actually delivery period of calendar year 2021, prices start to get more volatile. They start to increase in price. They doubled effectively. And then ultimately, after some craziness within the market, kind of settled back down to a more reasonable amount there. And what this is just showing is that prices had been kind of fairly normal. Everything had been kind of business as usual. And then, enter the post-COVID era and things just started to go crazy within the energy markets because of supply constraints and other rules and regulations and weather events that have been cropping up out of, various places around the country. If we go to the next one, this is the same exact setup for chart. It's just showing 2022. This one is a lot more extreme in terms of what's actually happening here. Prices were for like a 2-year period were roughly $50 or so for the calendar year strip there. And then kind of right at the end there, just popped up to around $450 because of some interesting market events there. And it's to note that we were not buying hedging at these high prices. What this is showing is that we locked in prices lower. So fictitiously, I'm going to say, let's just say we bought power at $75. When these prices start to jump around, Then we have what's known as mark-to-market risk. So if we bought at $75 and now the market is saying $450, the differential between those two, the $375 differential, is calculated as a mark-to-market. So we are marking our executed transactions to what the market is currently showing. And if that's in a positive direction, which in this example is $375 positive above what we paid, that amount then is potential collateral that we have to call onto our counterparties because they're at risk of having to buy power at a much higher price if they are not able to procure or if they're not able to sell us the power that they said they would. So when we start to get crazy market volatility like this, there comes into play where we're at more risk to our counterparties than kind of in a normalized market. And that works both ways too, whether it be a positive or a negative mark to market. Now on the next one is calendar 2023. This one shows that prices were on a steady increase and then decided to kind of fall off and drop back down to where they were a few years ago. So pricing just goes all over as you start to see how different periods of time shape up, how summers are being handled, how winters are being handled, natural gas storage amounts, different requirements on the system, any kind of PUC requirements or changes. All of those things can kind of drive pricing to go around because people are unsure of or taking positions in terms of what they think the price is going to be for these future years. Next, please. And then this is to just show kind of the different forward curves from various vendors. So as part of our analysis process for long-term procurement, so long-term PPAs, like our wind farms or our solar farms, et cetera, we do kind of a valuation process. And we value those off of different energy curves from, potentially different energy, kind of like consultants or providers of these different forward curves. And this is to just illustrate that there's a very wide view of what pricing can be in the future. So these are monthly pricing going out through, 2040. And so each one of these curves is a little bit different. There's some different modelings behind them. There's some different assumptions behind them. There's some different methodologies on how they actually get created. But this is just to kind of illustrate that depending on which curve you go to, a project may seem like it's going to make a lot of money, or it could seem like it's not going to make a lot of money. And so that's why using a variety of different forward curves and all of our different kind of valuation activities, whether it be short-term or long-term, it gives us a more holistic view of different points of views across the industry and across the different, kind of forward curves here. Next, please. Cool. So now we'll go into...
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
A couple things. One is, if you can go back one slide, I would suggest maybe we just take a brief pause here to see if there are any questions, because this is very dense material, and the following couple of sections will continue to be somewhat dense, and so it may be good to just take a breath and let the board ask any questions to the extent they have any. And board, as you maybe tee up any questions, let me just make two quick comments. One is that I think the last sort of handful of slides there really, some of the big takeaways I have to share are there's a lot of volatility in the market. And there's prior sort of graphs that show the forward curves, or I shouldn't say the forward curves, but the pricing leading up to a certain hedged period. You can see sort of generally there's a lot of stability further out. And then as you get closer to the date of the hedge period, you can see increased volatility. That volatility has increased in more recent years as well. So that's one takeaway. The other takeaway is on this graph, you can see different forward curve providers have very different views on what pricing will be. So no surprise, no one has the ability to actually predict the future and what energy prices will be. We as an entity don't try to obviously make those guesses. We try to be disciplined, and we try to hedge some of that risk away through various contracts and tools. And I know we will touch later on in terms of some of those risk management practices, but I just wanted to sort of highlight that as some takeaways for these curves. I also want to highlight one more thing, which is the reason to hedge is obviously to minimize the level of exposure that we have in our rates and therefore for customer energy costs. What is an added dynamic of a challenge for us is because there is the PCIA, the power charge difference adjustment. To the extent we wanted to hedge and fix some of these costs for our customers, there's obviously a stack of costs within the PCIA that our customers will inevitably still be exposed to. So you have to add that element of variability that we don't technically control. And while we don't technically pay the PCIA ourselves, or our customers certainly do. So you have to account for that as we're thinking about market exposure that our customers face. And then the last element, stating the obvious, is we also want to be cost competitive to PG&E. So we want to manage our risk. We want to hedge away some of this exposure. We also have to think about what is PG&E doing, because we do index to them. We want to be cost competitive to them. So we also have to account for what are their hedge practices in order to ensure that we can be competitive. So I just state that because certainly there's a lot of dialogue and good commentary and questions around, cost of service. How do we want to structure our rates, things like that. So we need to combine the risk management elements as well as the sort of JPA competitiveness elements to PG&E, and these are topics that we will certainly be revisiting in the coming months and beyond as we think about how we set our rates. So with that, maybe worth a pause to the board to see if they have any questions, and if not, certainly we can move on to the next section.
I see a question from Member Balch.
Yeah, and if any other additional members have questions, maybe we can try to use the raise hand function. I know we're looking at slides while we're doing this. Chris, I actually wanted to ask about, maybe we could look at your slide 34, the calendar 2023 forwards.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we want to display that slide. Maybe, I'm sorry, Marie, or Adrian. Yeah, so let me make sure I understand how this works, because this is the price. The first line on this is January 2nd, 2020. So this is saying if you want to buy the 23 power on January 2nd, 2020, it's approximately this $38, correct?
Mm-hmm.
How much power are you buying? You're not buying a specific date, or are you buying the entire 23 calendar year? How much are you buying?
So there's 8,760 hours in a typical year. We would be buying a block of megawatts for every single hour of that year. So that's what a calendar strip is. It's for every single hour. So at a given kind of transaction piece, we typically do about 25 megawatt blocks or so. So what we do is we don't buy it all at once. We kind of dollar cost average. We have some methodologies internal to how we kind of procure into a particular period. So we wouldn't get it all at that 38. It would be at some, in this case, level higher, because every price is higher than the starting point. But that's kind of the general concept of how things work.
Okay. And so then the second thing is not plotted on this chart is the actual procurement or the cost of the power. This is just our hedge price, right? So we don't know if we're in the money or out of the money based on this chart right now. We just see the volatility as we approach 0 day of 2023, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So there'd be like a step chart of different kind of, procurements that we do throughout the years leading up there. And then whatever that final weighted average is versus this is whether we're in the money or out of the money relative to the market.
Okay, so I understand this chart then for all of 2020 presented, all of 21 presented, and all of 22. Mm-hmm. Help me understand what the chart means when 2023 is on. Does that mean you're buying in the year for the year? You're just buying whatever's extra, or you may not have hedged previously?
So once you get to that 2023 part in this chart, then there's what's known as balance of year procurements. So it's everything for the rest of the year that you can procure. We didn't actually do any balance of year procurement for 2023. So this is just showing how the market continues to be volatile even up until the very end of the year that you're in.
Yeah. So in that regard, our cup is approximately 8,000. You mentioned the new denomination, but let's just say 8,000 capacity. When have we completed the hedge for the capacity we expect? Do we complete the hedge a year ahead, 2 years ahead? When have we completed the 23 hedge?
Good question. I would say it depends on how favorable pricing is that we see relative to historicals. We may put on heavier positions earlier if prices are like super low, or if prices are very high, we may kind of sit sidelines a little bit, procure a little bit less, but still kind of regimented. But typically, given our hedging kind of policies that we're actually working on right now, we are typically hedged whatever our maximum hedge amount is, kind of the up until the month before the procurement time period.
Okay, so we would then fall into the 23 forwards process.
Yep.
Yeah, and then anything.
So the forward piece of the actual 2023 for this is if we hadn't hedged all the way and we wanted to procure for the rest of the year as we got there. Typically, we've been doing procurements kind of on an annual basis because you get a better price because a counterparty can kind of lock in that full year. But if we wanted to say, okay, we wanted to only hedge for the first 6 months of the year, and then the second 6 months, we'll wait until we get into the year of, and then procure kind of the remainder for that period. Then that second, or not the second part, but the last year of this chart would then come into play as these are what the prices are for that rest of that period that we need to procure in.
Okay, so then the next chart, here's where I'm going with this. So then the next chart, which shows each provider on the forwards, really is going to show us what we're dealing with when we bring on you're right there, Stockton and Lathrop, right? So when we're hedging, we've got to hedge for a larger capacity in the future as we bring on additional jurisdictions, right?
Yeah.
So we're hedging. So the sooner a community wants to let Ava know that they're coming on board, the longer the runway is, the better we can hedge the risk and hopefully pass that on to our customers.
Yeah, typically speaking, that's a good methodology to follow. Markets have been a little interesting lately. The prices have been going down as opposed to up, which they had been for the past, call it 3 years. But generally speaking, yes, that is a good way to think about things. The earlier, the better, because then we can start position management and determining what makes the most sense to hedge that new load.
And then my last question, I think Marie may know this as well, but we don't hedge everything. I believe we try to also do float the market in case there is a downward trend in the pricing that we can still take advantage of that. So do you remember offhand how much of our total portfolio are we estimating to try to hedge? I thought it was close to 70%, but I'm not sure where I got that.
Yeah, it kind of varies depending on the month or the quarter of the year. We have it broken down sort of by quarters. Typically Q1 and Q3 are the most volatile because of heating loads and then AC loads, depending, very weather driven. So those ones we typically try and hedge a little bit higher in terms of percentages, kind of closer to that 80-90% range. And then the other months, particularly spring, try and hedge lower where possible.
Because we already have curtailments.
Yeah, and prices are just typically suppressed in those periods of time there. But typically, in the past we have been procuring calendar strips, so that means that we go a little bit overhedged and kind of underhedged depending on, kind of the shape that we have in our load, kind of month to month period there. But those are general percentage kind of targets that we're shooting for.
So if we hedged 100% and we ended up not needing it all and markets obviously went up, we could then obviously sell and make money on the hedge itself.
Yeah, if there's time before the spot market, you could do that. You could unwind some of the position that you have. Or if you go long into a given period, let's say calendar 2023 for this example, it would just be sold at the spot market price. So everything gets dumped into the CAISO market once you actually hit the delivery period. And then whatever the price settles there, that price versus your kind of forward hedge cost is whether you make or lose in terms of the value there.
Yeah, and I would just clarify, if you're long on your hedges and you're kind of the notion that you could sell it is, we would call that more of an unwind. That could be an in the money or an out of the money hedge. So if it's an out of the money hedge and you try to go sell it, quote unquote, then you're technically losing money when you sell that hedge or you unwind that hedge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then one other element just to throw in there too is, and this is maybe what I'd call a 401 topic for the future, but in our hedge methodology, we incorporate something where we account for the PCIA. So while that is short-term market exposure, it is actually risk that is mitigated via PCIA related resources. And so with that, we are, approximately fully hedged depending on the time period looking at. If you don't account for that, then, depending on the time frame, you may be more like 70 or 80% hedged. But that's really more of working capital exposure. A much more complex topic, which we'll probably cover in more detail in the future, but just wanted to note that here for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any additional questions by any additional members at this time? Okay, seeing none, I think we can continue. Thank you.
Cool. I'm going to speed up some of these sections here, just given time, but we'll keep moving here. Okay, so day ahead. I went over kind of the basics of that before. I don't think there's anything new on here. Typically, the day ahead market is less volatile than the real-time market. So that's why putting things in that market is generally a good thing, at least from a risk mitigation perspective. Next slide, please. So here's the day ahead pricing for 2018 through 2023. This is every hour of each year, and it just shows what the kind of average, the hourly DLAT prices were for each hour of each year. It's interesting to note is that if you start to look kind of in the 22 through 24, 22 through kind of 23 timeframe, we start to see a lot more volatility, some price spikes that really start to reach up high. If you look on the y-axis, it shows 0, 500, 1,000. 2019 was a very mild year, but kind of every year since then, there's been a little bit of fun. And as I mentioned, everything's kind of centered around that Q1, namely like February-ish of Q1, and then August, September of Q3. Where we've had some interesting heat waves in the past. Next. So these are just some box plots just to show kind of what's going on here. A box plot shows there's like a solid line in the middle that shows the mean, and then the box is going to show the 25 through the 75th quartiles, and then kind of the dot periods are showing some outliers within the data sets there. So if you look going back to 2012 all the way through 2023, this is just showing that there's been a lot more kind of outliers in terms of price. There's been a lot more volatility because the spread of the box is much higher. And yeah, kind of just a different way to show the previous slide. Next. And then this is just to break things down into buckets, just so we can see kind of the progression here. Just showing that the mean is starting to get higher in terms of price. So the mean was in the 30s, now it's in the 60s. And the standard deviation from that mean is also getting a lot bigger. So it was 12, 27, 60. It looks like it's doubling every kind of chunk of time here. Hopefully that doesn't keep happening, but it's just showing the progression of the market thus far. Next. Okay, so real-time pricing review. Let's go through that. Again, I mentioned all this before, nothing new here. Typically, real-time prices are lower on average than day-ahead prices, but they are more volatile. So you got to kind of balance the two there. Next, please. So here's 15-minute market prices for those same years there. Again, a lot more volatility in all years because the real-time market is much more volatile because you start to get units turning on and off, weather changing, all that kind of fun there. And we've seen a lot more volatility in the recent years, kind of in that post-COVID timeframe than we did before. Next, please. Similarly, similar box plot set up here for each year. I think real-time markets have been generally volatile, but again, now you can see that box, the quartile of 2022, 2023 start to be a lot bigger. So that's just showing that there's more kind of inherent volatility that's not just weighted by the outliers. It's actually, there is more volatility within the pricing, or spread in the pricing, I should say, from top to bottom. Next. And then again, bucketed hourly, means higher, standard deviations higher, similar story, starting to get pretty big there. Next. Risk management. So this is the last section that I have here. So, you know, I've showed all this different market stuff, and it's like, well, now how do we manage our risk through all of this? There's a lot of different ways that we can do that. You know, I think one of the big things is doing that kind of hedging program that we have that we just went over, you know, quite a bit there. You know, but risk management is important for a lot of different reasons. You know, it takes care, it doesn't take care of, but it helps to, you know, mitigate the exposure to volatility within the different markets that we are procuring within. You know, it helps us with budget certainty. Definitely. It helps, you know, kind of manage those, you know, the customer rates a little bit better because of those kind of known costs that we have. Again, budget certainty, financial stability, you know, they're kind of analogs of each other there, but, you know, hand in hand, you know, when it goes there. You know, there's regulatory compliance that we have to kind of meet. And so there's different risk management factors that we can do to that. You know, should we procure early? Should we procure later? What kind of resources do we procure? Thinking about risk from both the market exposure, but also the capacity or the rec exposure that we have. All these different pieces kind of come together that we end up mitigating there. And then ultimately, you know, the risk comes down to kind of our rating. So we got a great rating right now. You know, I guess they thought we have a pretty good risk management program, and we're only going to take that and try and get better and more robust so that we can, you know, ensure that we have a competitive product. Next, please. So these are just a whole, that's a really bright pink. These are just a whole bunch of different kind of key risks that we have across pretty much everything that kind of the Power Resources team does. You know, a lot of these are with respect to contracting. So like long-term procurement. So that would be like development performance, the length of contract, change in law, compliance. You know, those things kind of come into play, you know, kind of a lot in our long-term procurement there. But the ones that are kind of CAISO market related are volume, profile, basis, and price. Those are kind of the key pieces that we can, you know, kind of mitigate in the short term here. We're definitely not dismissing or discounting the longer term ones here that are in this, you know, kind of blocks here. But from a market standpoint, those are the ones that we can use the tools that I kind of just discussed here to try and mitigate those risks. And then we have other ways of mitigating the risks of those other ones, depending on, you know, how they come up there. Next, please. So, you know, one of those things is we have a risk oversight committee, also known as the ROC. And there's two different kind of ultimate documents that we have. We have the management policy and the management procedures documents that outline how we think about risk in a methodology standpoint. What are our approved products, the counterparties, which personnel can transact different products and different levels of products. Like, for example, if I wanted to go out and lock up our entire 2023 position, you know, at even at the $38, because we have such a big position, that would be a very large notional amount, and we would probably have to get board approval at that limit maybe. But in any case, there's different, you know, different transactional limits there. You know, we have different compliance trainings. We have exceptions reporting. So if we need to go outside of our approved kind of guidelines because there's a product that's either unique, a project that is something that's non-standard or very, you know, advantageous to us, we have to report that to the Risk Oversight Committee, and they're the ones that kind of approve yes or no on whether that can actually move forward. And then this is the last, I think this is the last slide here. So this is just showing part of our, you know, our risk management framework here. So forward prices, Yeah, if we go back to those curves where all those different curve providers had all these various curves, those are all created using a modeling called production cost modeling. So there's a lot of assumptions that go in about the system. And ultimately what it's doing is it's generating prices hourly into the future based on, all the things that they put into the model. What we typically do, at least kind of for the shorter term pieces, that I should say that framework works great for long-term valuation, but kind of in the shorter term, it makes more sense to look at what is the current market showing and what has happened in the recent past to really get a good kind of grasp on, what is the variation or the volatility that we could potentially see in prices. So this is one tool that we have at the price distribution. What it does is it takes the last 4 years of pricing data and it weights them differently. So it weights it heavier to more recent time. Pricing typically follows kind of closely to what's happened recently. Interesting enough, you can see day ahead prices that if you just use yesterday's price, it could match tomorrow's price because they're so close in time, and the weather typically doesn't swing that far, around. So recent history is a good indication of what's going to happen in the near term future. And so we have models like this that we use to help us determine whether the current forwards, which in this case is the black line on this chart, are within the statistical bounds of the recent history. We also use stochastics and Monte Carlo simulations to really get a good handle on our at-risk metrics. So at-risk being the difference between the mean and the P5 or P95, depending on how you think about it, i.e. the downside risk that we have in terms of either things costing more or us getting paid less for our supply. And we do all of these different, pieces to put together and to determine, how do we manage our volumetric portfolio with all their, kind of unknowns from wind and solar. And then how do we manage our financial portfolio given these, pricing simulations that we're doing and determining, are our transactions in the money? Are they out of the money? Are there certain periods of time where there's a lot more risk because historically prices have been more volatile? All those different factors go into how we procure, why we procure, and ultimately what, ends up happening kind of, in our portfolio. And with that, I will end the energy market section.
This is a good time to pause and see if there are any questions on the last 30 minutes or so of Chris's presentation. It was all totally clear, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Do any members have any questions they would like to ask at this time? Use the raise hand function. I don't believe so. Is there, and there's a bit more presentation, right, Marie?
There are a few slides that we added to the appendix including a map of where our current long-term contracted resources are, and another graphical representation of those resources. So, why don't we go ahead and display those last few slides?
Well, and if I may, I know we have a member of the public that would like to speak as well. So I did want to make sure we completed the item presentation by staff.
That's fine. Yeah, we really just added some representations of our long-term contracted portfolio in case there were questions about that in relation to the resource adequacy, renewable and carbon-free energy, or the energy market slides. No planned talking points related to these, though.
Okay, so why don't we, if you don't mind, staff, why don't we go ahead and stop sharing the slides now? We'll hold off on those. We'll see if there's any additional member comments of any of the board members at this time before I open it up to. So we're at clarifying questions. It is an informational item. Are there any additional clarifying questions? Okay, seeing none. Adrian, if you don't mind, can we go ahead and open the public comment? Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes.
Excuse me. Great, thank you. Cynthia Landry, you're recognized for 3 minutes. Cynthia Landry, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
I accidentally raised my hand. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Are there no further hands raised at this time?
Okay, so we'll close the public comment period. Again, this item is an informational item. Are there any members of the board that wish?
I think that Member Balch might be having an audio or visual problem, so I'll go ahead and call on Member Kalb, please.
Thanks, Marie. I just wanted to say how fortunate we all are to have such a tremendous staff and tremendous team at Ava Community Energy doing what they're doing. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank all of them for the helpful information that we got today and for all their work every day.
Thank you.
Any other comments? And thank you, Marie. I am having technical difficulties over here. So if I'll just also mention, I appreciate this because I've been asking about what noodle pricing is for a while. So it's definitely a bit more understanding on that. So from my perspective, I really do appreciate that. And the forward hedging, which we do see these large volume contracts come before Ava's board often, obviously is something that this board is very, needs to be very aware of. We're tasked with. It's a very significant obligation on our part when we take those votes. So this background knowledge on that is extremely helpful. Does the CAC or any additional members have any additional comments before we conclude here? All right. Seeing no additional comments and nothing further from staff at this time, correct, Marie?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. That concludes this meeting of Ava Community Energy Special Board Meeting, Board Retreat. Have a wonderful day. See you guys soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.